The Romantic period in the late 18th and mid-19th century was a reaction to the scientific revolution and Enlightenment. It proved that every action truly has an equal and opposite reaction. Romanticists such as Edgar Allan Poe, Mary Shelley, J.W.M. Turner, and Auguste Rodin gave life to the movement by bringing people back to the raw underside of human emotion, exploring it honestly through their art and writings. They rejected the ideals science had fueled enlightened thinkers to have.
The Romanticism era was a time period best known for being an artistic, literary, and intellectual movement, in which many Romanticists got to express themselves by referring to nature, their emotions, and religious beliefs. That era never really disappeared. Instead, it was just overtaken by other aesthetic paradigms, such as modernism.
Edgar Allan Poe was an American writer during the Romantic movement. His dark emotional writings focused on unpleasant emotions such as the loss of loved ones, feeling depressed and alone. Edgar Allan Poe wrote an essay on the creation of the raven entitled The Philosophy of Composition. In this essay, he described beauty to be the theme of the poem, since beauty is the sole legitimate province of the poem. After choosing beauty as the province, Poe considered sadness to be the highest manifestation of beauty. Beauty of whatever kind, in its supreme development, invariably excites the sensitive soul to tears. Melancholy is thus the most legitimate of all poetic toils, Poe said. Poe experienced this beauty of sadness himself, struggling with alcohol and opiate addictions throughout his life. In a letter to his aunt, Maria Clem, he says, "You will always have the reflection that my agony is more than I can bear, that you have driven me to the grave, for love like mine can never be gotten over." This dark emotion he faces in his daily life is reflected in his poetry. He shows emotion without reason in his characters. In The Raven, a man is driven to madness because of his lost Lenore, which leads him to idolize and argue with a raven, an irrationality that completely opposes the principles of the Enlightenment. Poe also addresses the irrationality of love in his letters, saying to his aunt, "Let me have, under her own hand, a letter bidding me goodbye, forever, and I may die, my heart will break, but I will say no more." Poe connects the loss of love with the loss of life, and the consumption of his being by emotion reflects the basis on which Romanticism was founded.
Is J.M.W. Turner. He's an English painter and watercolorist. Born in 1775, he's a talented painter whose distinguished drawing skills were discovered during his early childhood. Nevertheless, his artworks received mingled receptions during his lifetime, but nowadays they are highly acclaimed and renowned. Among his numerous works, the most noteworthy masterpiece could be The Fighting Temeraire. Painted in 1838, this painter depicted the last second-rate ship of the line, HMS Temeraire, was slowly hauled to the harbor of bunkering down for scrap. The dirty steamboat, which is an innovation of the Industrial Revolution, was painted in a stark contrast with the neat and aesthetically pleasing old warship. This conveys a message that the painter rejects the ideology derived from the Enlightenment era.
Mary Shelley was an early feminist, English novelist, and short story writer. She is best known for her Gothic novel, Frankenstein. Mary Shelley stands out from other Romantic writers of her era through her use of romantic characteristics, but also challenges the common use and treatment of them. Frankenstein represents the dark part of human nature. Shelley avoids overthinking or offering her own interpretation for the reader to adopt. She creates a novel that is incredibly more complex than the works of her contemporaries. The reader is left to answer moral questions. Different from typical romantic works, this novel ends with the characters having no significant resolution among themselves. Usually, if a romantic novel does not end on a good note, it ends on a meditative note. Instead, the characters realize the impossibility of striving against roles they have been assigned in life and cannot figure out another option for themselves. This novel can serve as an allegory for the struggles that romantic writers too often faced.
Auguste Rodin lived from 1840 to 1917, in which time he imprinted his name in the histories of Romantic art, with internationally famous works such as The Thinker and his eccentric representation of the French author Balzac. Rodin believed, as he explained to writer Paul Gaussel, that art is contemplation. It It is the delight of the mind that penetrates nature and divines the spirit by which nature itself is animated. It is a joy of intelligence that sees clearly into the universe and creates the universe anew by endowing it with consciousness. Art is the most sublime mission of man, since it is the exertion of the mind trying to understand the world and make the world understood. Art is also taste. It is the reflection of the artist's heart in all the objects he makes. It is the smile of the human soul, visible in the home and in its furnishings. It is a charm of thought and sentiment, made part of everything that serves mankind. Rodin rejected the pursuit of reason and perfection, preferring instead to follow nature in its purest, most natural form. Rodin's infamous work, The Thinker, is representative of knowledge and learning. An observer can read raw human emotion in the statue, not only in the subject's face, but the tension and relaxation of each defined muscle throughout the thinker's body. The thinker's honest depiction of unbrushed sentiment and knowledge mixed to create a brilliant work of romantic art. Rodin would go on again to shock the public in his representation of the tortured genius of French writer Balzac. While Rodin regarded the work as the result of a lifetime and the pivot of his aesthetic, the statue was widely rejected by the public at first. The public had anticipated an idealized version of the writer, but instead, Rodin's Balzac captured the author's persona and tormented virtuoso. Upon viewing the statue, an onlooker sees a man with hair messily falling over his shoulders, a cloak wrapped tightly about his body as he stares into the sky, anguish written into the lines of his face. In contrast to the thinker, an observer reads the tormented author's story from the lack of detail surrounding his torso and lower body. The lack of detail throughout Balzac's body accents the anguish inscribed deep into the writer's face. In both pieces, Rodin does not attempt to understand or improve on nature, but mirror the human experience. Rodin condemned the Enlightenment's focus on harnessing and improving upon the natural world. Rodin once confessed, "I obey nature, and never do I give orders to it. My only ambition is servile fidelity to it." The sculptor saw nature as the sovereign mistress in infinite perfection. To attempt to embellish upon or alter such a thing would be to create the ultimate lie.